Rise of the Tomb Raider is the sequel to the 2013 reboot, which reinvented the Tomb Raider series and introduced a new, relatable, and more human take on Lara Croft. The reboot was met with a positive reception for overhauling the Tomb Raider gameplay formula, which had become pretty stale and stagnant for a long time. With Rise of the Tomb Raider, Crystal Dynamics attempts to expand on everything they did in the Tomb Raider reboot to deliver an epic experience and adventure. In Tomb Raider, Lara was a very curious but also very unexperienced explorer and archaeologist, and a shipwreck catapulted her into her first adventure and forced her rapid growth and maturity through the sequences of many traumatic experiences to lead her to become the Tomb Raider. In Rise of the Tomb Raider, the story gives a lot of exposition and background into why Lara chooses to go on this adventure and what drives her and what motivates her to pretty much go headfirst into clear danger. The story reveals that her motives are to restore a legacy, but also explore this whole dynamic of this obsessive personality that she has for archaeology and ancient history. And honestly, morality is not a factor in many of the decisions that she makes. Of course, Lara tries to do the right thing for people and humanity, but in regards to her desire and passion for exploration and archaeology, she doesn't let anything get in her way, even if that means bringing the ones she care about into clear and present danger, or mass murdering hundreds of men to obtain an ancient artifact of mythical power. So this brings Lara to Siberia in search of an ancient city while fighting a very well-funded and organized sect called Trinity, who are also interested in supernatural powers, and along the way Lara also finds herself encountering other supernatural entities. I like the Tomb Raider story because it dived deeper into Lara's personality, and you got to learn more about her life and legacy. So this story had multiple layers. It explored who Lara was as a person, while also giving you the game's main story about this ancient artifact and Trinity, and all the legend that came with the people involved. So I enjoyed both aspects of the story, and even though I'm not a huge fan of audio logs in games where they try to give you exposition on a certain part of the story without it being in the main story, I actually did find some pieces of these documents, which you have to find in the game, rather interesting. And I found myself listening to a few and trying to connect the dots of what they don't tell you in the main story. The events in this game give you a real feeling of an epic adventure and exploration. It also gives you this feeling of real danger. Also, it manages to deliver these real captivating, edge of your seat, tense cliffhangers through some impressive cinematic set pieces, which Crystal Dynamics have obviously learned from other games in the industry. This story has a greater focus on fewer characters than the game's predecessor. This allows for the fewer characters to be fleshed out more and for you to learn about their layers and their substance that they have. The characters are more believable, and throughout the story you're given these opportunities to understand why these characters are even significant and why you should even care about them a little bit. The voice acting for the characters is overall a good job, and the story is a well executed one. So I enjoyed it. Rise of the Tomb Raider is a beautiful game, but you can definitely notice and tell the hardware limitations within it. The game explores several different gorgeous environments. The lighting and shadows and even textures overall in the game are impressive for a semi-open world game running on consoles. That said, you can definitely notice shimmering jaggies throughout the whole game. The physics have been improved, especially Lara's hair physics. Even though it's not something that us gamers probably find a big deal, Lara's hair now acts very naturally and realistically now. And Crystal Dynamics have made great use of different camera angles in the game to really capture emotion and intensity in several different situations. So their camera work is absolutely amazing. The angles they choose and the way they pan the camera in certain situations when Lara is in tight spaces or when she enters a new environment, the way the camera pans out to capture the whole atmosphere is just really amazing. Not only are the hair physics good, but Lara actually acts more like a real human character now. Sometimes you'll see her interact with the environment, touching when she moves around, looking in certain directions of attention. When she goes through traumatic experiences, she may get dizzy. When she's cold, she'll hold her arms, she'll shake. So she actually reacts and behaves based on what she just went through or what is currently going on in her environment. So they put a lot of attention to detail, especially when I see something of attention that I know I'm looking at. I'll look at Lara's face and see that her head is turned in that direction too, or turned down, and she's looking directly at what is the focus. Also, when Lara gets in certain situation and she takes damage, you'll see that afterwards there'll be abrasions, cuts, and bleeding on her skin, dirt. Her skin will overall match what she's been through. Lara's character model is amazing and very detailed. The detail is a little bit less for the NPCs and other characters, especially the generic enemies are much less defined. Lara encounters more wildlife in this game, and some of the wildlife look very artificial, such as the bear you'll come across. It's not a very convincing bear. It looks very plastic and artificial. So that's one thing I definitely think they could have done a better job at, especially given the art style. Rise of the Tomb Raider runs at a native 1080p, 30 frames per second, but the frame rate starts to suffer, especially later on in the game when you get into bigger hub spaces and you encounter a larger amount of enemies. Throughout the game, it's mostly consistent, only dropping to about a few frames below 30 occasionally, but towards the other half of the game, you will come across some sequences and sections where you have a high enemy count and a lot of screen activity, and that causes the game to drop to the mid and lower 20s for a very short time. Keep in mind, I obviously had a review copy, so it is possible that the game might get a day one patch, which could improve the frame rate. But overall, it's a great looking game with solid textures, and they seem to put a great emphasis and a lot of work into the areas covered in ice, because the ice looks very authentic and very real, and it even glistens how you would see ice glisten in real life. So that was very impressive. Crystal Dynamics really fleshed out the gameplay in Rise of the Tomb Raider. There is honestly too many gameplay mechanics for me to mention in this review. She has new skills, weapons, tools, and passive abilities, as well as these unique gameplay segments that you'll come across throughout her journey. Her skills, weapons, and equipment are accessed at base camps, which are located at several different locations all over the game, which also allows you to fast travel, which is very much needed when you need to go back and access an area which you couldn't before because now you have new equipment. Her skills are separated into 3 different categories: Hunter, Survivor, and Brawler. Brawler is generally the skill category for defensive combat skills. Survivor is the skills for crafting and making different items for your weapons. And the Hunter category are more offensive combat skills. You can also change Lara's outfit, which some of them are not only aesthetic but do provide some passive abilities. Also, with passive abilities, you can gain those by locating the different optional tombs in the game, searching them, and solving the easy to moderate puzzles within them. Rise of the Tomb Raider is a true exploration game that rewards you for exploring. You mostly get your XP in this game, which you use to unlock your skills, by exploring. You also get XP through killing enemies and just progressing through the game, but most of your XP will come by exploring the world and finding the different collectibles such as relics, lockboxes, documents, searching the crypts, the different challenges in the different hub spaces, reading the murals, and everything like that. This is not a game that rewards you with the best weapons and the best abilities just by playing the main missions. You are doing yourself a great disservice and missing out on a lot of weapons, content, and abilities that really help you throughout the game if you do not explore and put time into finding them. The game's main mission and story only provides you with the bare minimum and default of weapons, items, and abilities that you would need to beat the game. So it's to your great advantage and your benefit if you actually take the time out to do side missions and actually explore the game to find everything that's hidden. They designed it purposely that everything you find in this game, practically literally everything in this game, gives you XP. So they are richly rewarding the player who explores with XP, which they can use to unlock all these different types of content. A great part of this game is Lara using her environment and survival techniques. So there is more crafting from what she finds in the environment, such as what she gets from wildlife and just natural items in the environment, such as bear hide, cloth, feathers, herbs, mushrooms, oils, and she can use these natural item parts and craft them into different throwable items such as bombs, Molotovs, and she can even take enemy radios and make them into a trap. So when an enemy steps in the proximity of the bomb, it obviously explodes. Or you can use the same items that she can craft into a bomb or a Molotov and use it as a distraction. You can throw it and the enemy's attention will be brought to that item that you threw, and then you can either choose to bypass that enemy or perform a stealth kill. There's a much improved stealth gameplay in Rise of the Tomb Raider. She can perform aerial kills from the trees she climbs. She can hide in bushes, and when an enemy approaches, she can grab them in and execute the stealth kill from there. She can swim to reach new areas or circumvent or to get an advantage on enemies and perform a stealth kill from the water. You also have the choice to manually heal Lara when she's hurt from combat, or you can just let the health regenerate slowly. As I stated, backtracking is very important in this game because as you get further in the game, you get access to weapons or tools that you didn't have before that you needed to access those areas. Also, Lara has her survival instinct, which highlights areas of interest or anything that you might need to see in her environment. The only problem I had with this survival instinct is that to find many things in the world, you had to constantly spam the survival instincts button, and you can't have it on while running. So you would constantly need to spam the button and stay in this mode for a significant portion of the game, and sometimes it just really got annoying because you had to spam it in order to find many things. Certain movement animations in the game did seem clunky sometimes, and I found it occasionally hard to be precise, especially when taking cover. Since there's no sticky cover system, you have to manually position yourself how you want, and sometimes that could lead to mistakes and occasionally not being so precise with your aim. I also had a issue with the game's aiming and sensitivity. It didn't seem to be as accurate and responsive as I wanted it to be. I wasn't sure if it was the actual game or the Xbox One controller sensitivity, which several people have had problems with across the board with different games in regards to the sensitivity and the dead zone. Also, if you want to get a challenge out of this, I recommend playing on the harder difficulty provided in the game because the AI in this game is aggressive but not very smart at all. Now, I would like to briefly segue to the microtransactions because that was a great concern when we learned that this game would have reportedly 300 microtransactions. I can report to all of you that the microtransactions in this game do not affect the story whatsoever, as they cannot be used in the story. The microtransactions in this game are for a separate mode called Expeditions. Expeditions is more or less a mission challenge mode where you can compare how well you do against your friends. And these microtransactions are cards that alter the gameplay within those expedition missions. So microtransactions do not affect the game's campaign as they cannot be used in it. Rise of the Tomb Raider is a game that delivered on all fronts of gameplay, visuals, and story. And it is a noticeable improvement over the game's reboot, which came out 2 years ago. This game is an absolute Game of the Year contender in my opinion, and that is why it gets the best rating in my system. This is a game I believe that is worth buying brand new at launch. This concludes my Rise of the Tomb Raider review. Thank you for watching. If you want a more in-depth explanation of my rating system, check out the link in the description. I'm out of here. Peace.